Greetings and a warm welcome back to the shop. It is time for an update on the Saab. All right, so starting right off the rip, it has been a while since I've given you a good update on the Saab, and there has been a lot of progress. That being said, let's do one thing at a time. First and foremost, we've got a lot of 3D printing being done in the background. Some work done by my good friend Ben Harbor. Thank you, Ben. I really saved a whole bunch of time by having you do these fun little side distractions for you. These are exhaust pieces. They will be epoxied together and go on essentially the bottom of the fuselage right here. But these are resin printed just because I really didn't want to do much post-processing. So huge shout out to Ben for taking care of that. Additionally, over here, I've been doing prints of engine parts and things. This is not the exact radial that was used in the Saab 17, but it's really, really close, and it gets to the point. It's a 9-cylinder, which counts. This is my friend Carl's model, and I decided to take a little bit of a different attack on this. I wanted to do the crankcase in ABS, mostly because of how brittle the resin prints can be. I wanted to have some flex somewhere in the model, and it just seemed like the best place to do it. So the crankcase and the bell housing and all that stuff, all the black pieces, those are ABS, and then these are resin printed, and this is just aluminum tubing you can pick up from a hobby store or McMaster Car or something like that. So I'm really happy with the progress there. That's got to move on to paint. I've got some additional pieces from Dubro that I'm going to use to mount that. So the mount will be to the front here, right up against the firewall, and I'll use the cowl mount, the easy cowl mount system to affix those to the front there. Okay, so that out of the way. That's just a hardware issue, a whole bunch of screws and fitting and stuff. The other thing that I've been working on the side is the spinner. So the spinner, if you look at any of the full-scale imagery, the spinner does not go over top of the blades. It keeps the adjustment portion exposed. So I wanted to try to replicate that, but I didn't want to go through the headache of making my own spinner. Dubro to the rescue. I'm using a Dubro spinner, and I filled it in with some foam, chucked it in the lathe, and you can see here where I had a piece of threaded rod where I chucked that in the lathe and smoothed it out with some sandpaper, and then covered it in some fiberglass. And there's a little bit of shrinking here, which I kind of expected on the fiberglass and from the compression of installing it. So that's why I have this installed, so this can fully cure out. I can do one last sanding and then it'll be fine and good to go. So that being set aside, let me do that real quick and then we'll move on to the fuselage. All right, so the fuselage looking pretty proper. We've got the top portion essentially done. The whole canopy area is all lined with balsa, and the hatch comes off, shows us our rudder and elevator servos, and you can see that the framework for the canopy is not glued in for good reason. I haven't gotten there yet. Now, a lot of this is just a lot of busy work. So curving, you can see I covered this in essentially two portions here. This back deck where I curved the edge. There's a seam up here, and then covered down to the former here. The vertical stabilizer is traditional buildup, just like you would normally do on the plans. I used the plans, and that was really straightforward. Able to knock it out in just like an hour and a half. Really simple stuff, not a big deal. The H-stab, didn't want to do the same thing because it was going to take about the same amount of time, but this I find easier. This is a hot wire cut, and I put a carbon fiber spar in the trailing edge here and then capped that with some balsa and then sand it in a recess and put some tips on the end. I've got the linkage here for the elevators. It's all internal, along with the rudder linkage inside here. Once this goes into the rudder, this will be fine. But there's a plastic bearing tube inside here to prevent friction, too much friction. So the H-stab is set. I made sure to check my incidence. Not going to make that mistake on this airplane. The incidence is correct on the H-stab. I in fact triple checked it. I checked it once before. I did a final dry fit, and then I checked it again during curing. And I'm not going to count the last time I checked. I checked it after all the Gorilla Glue cured out. So it is set. It's right. We're really good. We've got a good 90-degree set on this, and I'm just pleased as punch. Now you can see that I've also done some sanding down the edge here. Never mind these shadows that you're getting here, but notice how nice and smooth this is. Now when you do some of this foam stuff with this construction technique, you'll get these waves where the foam doesn't quite evenly conform to the formers. And so that's why you want to build a little bit thick. So for example, you know, this foam used to be 4.5, 5 inches thick, but now it's somewhere on the order of 3, because you want to shave some of that down. So make sure that you're accounting for some of that foam loss as you sand it down to get the curves right. All right, so we have a tail gear obviously still, but at this point, the fuselage, the bulk of the fuselage is done. It's exciting to have it to this point, but I still feel behind in my schedule. There's still quite a bit left to do on the fuselage. I need to glass it still, obviously. I'm basically there on that. Need to wrap up the canopy, which takes me back to 3D printing. All right, so another huge shout out to my friend Ben, who did some more CAD work for me. He was able to take this former, extrude it forward, and do some rounding out after creating a slant so that I could have a forward canopy mold. See that? So now I can set this on my vacuum form table, and I can pull a vacuum on this and have a vacuum form canopy. The reason being that I didn't want to do just flat sheet, because this is a compound curve. If I were trying to do this out of flat plastic, it just would not look right. And I wanted to refine that. So we're going to do our first vacuum form model, canopy on a model from a resin printer. And the reason I went with resin printer is so that I wouldn't have a whole lot of finish work to do. I had some sanding to do, just a little hit of filler here to hit some of these high spots at the very end of the print. But other than that, just a simple sand down is all that it took to get to that point. What's left? So what you see before you is a whole lot of ribs. And we've got some other pieces in here too that I need to account for, but the majority of this is ribs. We're on to making the wings. Along with making the wings comes the landing gear. Now, I, in the background, have also been working with a friend of mine in my club who is a machinist. Thank you, Tom, so much for working with me on this project. We're doing some custom landing gear. I have some electric retracts that I plan on using for this, very robust units, and tried to modify some off-the-shelf struts. Didn't really work entirely, so we're kind of doing a hybrid of modifying / new. We'll cross that bridge when we get to that point. But I've met with Tom, went over to his house a couple times to just talk shop, and he's an old guy, great to talk with. He's got great stories too, so don't mind going over to spend time with Tom. So that is on the table too, should be coming in another couple of weeks, but I got to get going on the wings so that we can get this bird in the air. So still have to build elevators, still have to build a rudder, still have to build a cowl. The wings, obviously we need to do the landing gear covers. So there's a lot of building left to do, and that's not even counting any of the finish work that needs to be done. Since I'm focusing mostly on the hardware on this, I really want to get to that stuff when it comes to that time. Got to build the model first. But that being said, I hope you're enjoying this build because it is a true testament to what you can do with foam on a heavy metal warbird. Last year I showed you what can be done on this kind of building style with a World War I era model, where you sort of leave things unfinished and a little vague, the way that things weren't entirely buttoned up, pristine, crystal clear. This is a deviation from that, but you can still use the same build medium, and I hope that you're seeing value in this. It's a little bit different. There is a bit more sculpting involved. As you can see on this part here, I had to put in a plug of solid foam. There is a hollow part here for the linkage, obviously, where there's an arm that sticks up and rotates back and forth. But I had to shape this, and I had to use my dowel with sanding paper on to shape this into a narrow portion here. It's a bit hard to see on camera, but being able to blend this in nice and evenly is a bit tricky. So take it for what you will, but it's certainly an approachable medium. Again, if you mess up, you don't care because you're not losing a lot of time and you're not losing a lot of cost and materials too. So don't be afraid to accomplish this. Dig in. Make some foam mess. Good heavens. Can you see the amount of mess that I am making in my shop? It is just everywhere, everywhere. And I love it. So thanks for coming on this journey with me. Stay tuned. I'm going to give you more updates on the Saab as we go. Take care, guys. And until next time, keep working on your flying works of art.